I'd like to ask you about your consumer predictions in terms of consumer expenditure. You say it's a very underpenetrated market, and you say that there's a potential rise in disposable income, but have you actually looked at the pricing? So, I mean, why is it underpenetrated?
The Philippines is currently underpenetrated in these two industries, mainly because of the low household disposable income. And we expect this to change moving forward because there is increasing disposable income due to the demographic sweet spot. This is also supported by the increasing labor force participation in the country and the lowering unemployment rate.
Right, but can that increase in disposable income, is that going to be sufficient for this market to actually afford these products?
The trend is that if the Philippine will actually increase its disposable income, it will also actually increase the consumer spending on higher value goods such as durables, which is air conditioners and refrigerators. And this will affect CIC in a positive way, that it will increase the sales of CIC's air conditioner and refrigerators.
Also, as we can see in this trend, there's an observable trend among countries wherein the penetration rates, for example, in air conditioners, are actually related to the disposable income of the country. And as we can see, the yellow dots represent the Philippines, and it's currently in a very steep slope. And as the country's disposable income increases, we see that the penetration rates of the industry will increase as well.
How much Capex are you assuming for your growth industries? You have free cash flow growing continuously. I'm a bit surprised to not see any dent in that from investment in the new businesses.
Okay, so our Capex is actually divided into two. For the maintenance Capex, what we did is the company will actually reinvest their annual depreciation expense so that they can ensure that their plants are actually up to date and state of the art. But for the growth Capex, its recent acquisition of Otis actually cost the company around 1 billion pesos. And we expect that in the near future, it will enter into joint ventures and acquisitions with under the industries of fire, lighting, and security, and it will cost roughly around the same price. But we weren't actually able to take into account these new acquisitions in our valuation model because the company hasn't been able to pinpoint how much and which company in specific.
You argued that the company is under-leveraged and has room to expand its debt. What do you think is the optimal capital structure for the company?
So the optimal capital structure for the company based on their management is actually around 70-30 or 80-20, meaning 70% equity and 30% debt. And this is primarily because of the conservative management style of the company, that they wanted to fund their growth strategies with internally generated funds.
Have you looked at the free float available in the market?
Yes, CIC's free float level is around 28.8%.
If the potential seems very strong and it has very dominant leadership position, why do you think it's undervalued?
During the target price, we see that CIC is actually undervalued because of two main reasons. First, that the market is actually not seeing the full growth potential of the core business of CCAC, which is the air conditioning and the refrigeration. And the second point is that they weren't able to see the full growth potential in the growth platforms with Otis and Medea. As we can see here, for the core business, CIC is actually trying to expand into new distribution channels, into tapping the real estate developers. For the growth platforms, when we did our valuation model, Otis and Medea are actually just new acquisitions and they weren't still fully integrated. So there were a lot of uncertainties on the market. But with the integration of Otis and Medea into the operations of the company, the market was actually able to see the potential and thus will be able to fully value the potential of CIC.
And to add to that, the fact that the growth platforms, when we checked out the 4Q14 sales, we see that actually Otis specifically was able to double that in terms of how the analysts expected, because they were able to contribute a significant portion in terms of the revenues.
What is stopping the company from going to overseas market if they have such a fantastic story in Philippines?
Well, CIC actually doesn't have any plans in exporting, mainly because they see a lot of potential here in the Philippines. The Philippines, as mentioned a while ago, only has 6% of penetration for the air conditioner. There is a lot of room for the company to grow inside.
And in addition, they also wanted to avoid as well the possible foreign exchange risk when they decide to export. That's why they were considering it, but then they decided that since the growth is here, might as well stay in the Philippines.
You brought up foreign exchange risk. Are they exposed to the stronger dollar in terms of importing raw materials or any other way?
Okay, so we acknowledge that CIC, being a manufacturing company that imports around 70% of its raw materials, is actually exposed to foreign exchange risk. But what the company is doing is that they invest in hedging instruments, such as, for example, foreign exchange forward contracts with average term of 3 months to reduce the possible losses on the fluctuations of the foreign exchange. But at the same time, we have conducted a sensitivity analysis that there were a lot of forecasts that with the strengthening of the U.S. economy this year, the U.S. dollar will actually appreciate up to 47 pesos per U.S. dollar. And upon conducting a sensitivity analysis, even at 47 pesos, we won't change our recommendation and we still recommend a strong buy.
What do you think is the biggest risk to the growth story of this company?
I'm sorry, sir, can you please repeat?
What is the biggest risk to the growth story that you are presenting?
Well, the biggest risk that we see is actually, though we didn't highlight it a while ago, it's very unlikely because if, let's say, the non-renewal of the license with Carrier or UTC, United Technologies, so what is the big risk here is because if Carrier were to say, pull out of this agreement, then CIC won't have as much in terms of their different products and services. But to mitigate that, when we thought about that possibility, what they said is that it's very highly unlikely because, one, we see that the long-standing relationship started back in the 1960s, and with the new acquisitions, especially with Otis, we see it's another UTC brand. So we see that this relationship is actually improving, moving on to the future.
To add to that, CIC also has its own brand, which is the Condura brand. And this Condura brand actually gives the company the bargaining power. Gives the company the bargaining power with United Technologies Corporation. Because if ever they pull out, they still have the Condura brand to push in the market. And with their very strong local knowledge and their strong R&D facility, and at the same time their wide distribution network, they can actually push Condura in such a way that it will be the competitor of Carrier.
If I understood you right, you were arguing that with the Midea product, the low-cost product, they're trying to move into a new area. What are their competitors doing in that space? Have you looked at market share and how that's likely to move in the next few years?
So for the Midea brand, it actually entered into the Philippines, into the consumer appliance. So basically what it's selling is microwave oven, rice cookers. And in terms of its competitors, Midea is actually an entry-level brand. So this helps in terms of creating synergistic opportunities for CIC, in terms of allowing CIC to cover the whole market, in terms of from aspirational brand to entry-level brand.
In terms of its competition, we have, for example, Panasonic. They don't have a price point as low as that of Midea. That's why we believe that CIC is actually taking advantage of this opportunity with having this entry-level brand compared to its competitors that have none.
And are any of its competitors bringing out low-entry brands as well?
They are also coming up with low-cost brands, but what we can see here is that Midea is banking on its very large operations. In fact, Midea, 1 out of the 4 split-type air conditioners is actually produced by Midea, and it is actually the #1 producer of microwaves, rice cookers, and this provides the company economies of scale in terms of its operations. That's why it can sell its products at a very low cost that others can't.
You must consider that the CIC actually has 90% distribution network on all appliance stores nationwide. This gives Midea more, and this is very hard to replicate, and this gives Midea more leverage against the other brands.
Any view on the upside in 3 years for the stock?
we see that there is actually very strong growth potential for CIC in the next 3 years. This is primarily because